Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining Halal in Travel Summit hosted by Crescent Rating. I am Mamadou, co-founder of Wasabih. Wasabih is the professional community for the halal economy. I've been involved in the startup for the last 10 years in Europe and in Southeast Asia. So I'm currently based in Malaysia, and today I'm honored to be joined by uh, entrepreneurs in the halal economy all over the world to discuss a very important topic, overcoming the challenges in startups in the Muslim lifestyle. The objective of this session is very simple. It's just to brainstorm as entrepreneurs. We would like to exchange ideas. The format it will be very simple as well. There is no such a structure. It's just to answer to few questions that we believe are fundamental to everyone who trying to venture in the Islamic economy, but also to all professionals that are interested into this industry. So I'll be introducing quickly our panelists. So I'll be starting with Saad Malik. Saad is the CEO and co-founder of Zoya Finance, a faith-based investing and personal finance app. His mission is to enable the nearly 2 billion Muslims in the world to take control of their financial future. Previously, Saad was vice president at JP Morgan, where he led global digital strategy and operations for JP Morgan Private Bank. Welcome, Saad.
Thank you, Mamadou. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Our next speaker is also a well-known guy in this Islamic economy industry, Maruf. It's an honor to have you here as well. Maruf is an award-winning serial entrepreneur. He advises companies in the Islamic economy on marketing and digital strategy. He's also a co-founder and CEO of Halal.Ad, a marketing agency and ad network for the global Muslim market. Assalamu alaikum, Maruf.
Walaikum salam. Thank you.
It's an honor. Last but not least, also trailblazer in the Islamic economy, Arfah. Arfah is a lifelong community builder and advocate for diversity and inclusion. She is a co-founder and CEO of Muslamic Makers, a community that helps the next generation Muslim change makers level up across the tech industry and beyond. Muslamic Makers was recently listed as the 100 most innovative global Muslim startups to watch. Arfah is available for consultancy, running workshop, and speaking opportunities. So welcome, everybody. It's really a pleasure. Assalamualaikum, Arfah. Welcome. So it's really a pleasure to have you guys here. I've sent you a few questions. I know we all are busy, and as entrepreneurs, I believe no, not much need for preparation because this is something we all are living. So it's not a lecture; it's just a discussion between entrepreneurs in the Islamic economy. So I'll be starting with an analysis because I believe what to do. All of you know what to do because you are addressing needs from a market. But in terms of how to do it, most of the time this is the difficult part, and this is why we are here, and this is why we are motivated to fix problems. So in terms of analysis, I would like to ask maybe Maruf, what would be your analysis of the Islamic economy startup ecosystem locally where you are and also globally. I believe also you have been involved in global change in the Islamic economy.
Yeah, Bismillah. So the question is, if I understand correctly, what is the status of Islamic economy locally and globally? Is that correct?
Yeah, what is your analysis of this Islamic economy as an industry before we go into the positioning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm right now currently based in Canada, our neighbor to USA. So one of the things in Canada is that what we are noticing, we are seeing interesting development in Islamic economy. We are seeing Muslim startups in Islamic economy popping up. I was just 2 3 days ago. I was in Halal Expo. I've seen so many new startups coming up into the scene, which I haven't known. Of course, in the expo, that's one of the good things. Expo, you will get to know new people, new entrants. At the same time, one thing is very interesting about Canada locally is that I think in North America, especially around Toronto area, the GTA, we call it, Ontario area, is the most dense Muslim population in the whole North America. Not anywhere in US. You will see so many, probably close to 1.5 million Muslims, in one hotspot. So that's one of the things that very special about Canada. In terms of the Islamic economy and the development, North America in general, we are seeing a lot of startups coming into halal food and also the Islamic finance sector. These are the most interesting we can see. I'm noticing personally. I don't know. So that would be my answer. The two most popular probably categories would be halal food and Islamic finance.
Wonderful. Yeah, I definitely noticed this when I came to Halal Expo Canada in 2019. So coming from France, I've really been amazed how the Muslims there in Canada are at a different level than the Muslim in France. I met some brothers who've been in real estate. They are building houses. Some they have watch companies. It's really amazing, mashallah. Jazakallah khair. So maybe Arfah, you can give us maybe your analysis of the Islamic economy, the perspective of upskilling the talents that we need in this industry.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'm based here in London, UK. I think we started our journey back in 2016. So I guess I've kind of seen it kind of evolve over the years. And I think what's really interesting is when we first started, I would say tech wasn't kind of seen as, and even startups and entrepreneurship within the Muslim community wasn't actually kind of seen as this thing that a lot of people entered. They were kind of curious about it, kind of interested in it. What's really interesting is now, where are we? Six years down the line? I would say there's so many more now Muslims within the tech fields. Let that be they're actually now working as developers or data analysts or etc. So it's almost like, I guess it's like generation shift, and that's really been interesting. And I guess from the halal economy side of things as well, I've definitely seen a shift, whereas back in 2016, the Muslim entrepreneurs may have been struggling to raise, and there were obviously things like again, halal food, Islamic finance, etc. Now there is just so much of that in a good way, and it's helping to create a competitive landscape. I mean, here in the UK, we obviously have kind of challenger banks, and in a sense, we've got a lot of now Muslim versions, in the finance space, for example, that have started to kind of pop up. So, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them, but also I would say is they're starting to find their way, and also starting to kind of convince investors, non-Muslim, to actually also invest in kind of their products, which are basically for kind of a niche market. So I think it's been really interesting to kind of have seen how we've kind of evolved, and also mostly just the fact that actually we have the talent now, and the talent has finally started to have the right skills, which is good for the Muslim startups, because not only would you hire somebody who comes from the Muslim background, who understands the cultural context, but actually has the skills that you need to kind of help build your business.
Wonderful. That's a great perspective about startups struggling for fundraising. It's not new. I mean, even outside Islamic economy, but I believe the Islamic economy has something specific, especially as you mentioned that the struggle they have to convince non-Muslims into investing into Islamic economy. So you can say that, okay, it's a 2 billion Muslim, the market is big, right? So isn't that enough for them to invest? Interesting perspective. So I believe Saad, working in finance, Islamic finance, can tell us more about his perspective, first about Zoya finance, and also maybe chiming in what Arfah raised regarding the struggle startups in the Islamic economy may have into convincing investors.
Sure. I would echo a lot of what the other panelists have said. My particular experience in this space is going back to 2009. Here in the U.S., I was part of an organization called AMCC where we held a first of its kind conference called the American Muslim Consumer Conference. And the idea was, long before anyone was talking about the Islamic economy, that label I don't even think existed back then. We had this idea of getting together a bunch of Muslim professionals and also large corporations and talking about the power of the Muslim consumer in terms of their spending. And we invited companies like Nestle and Pepsi and several other large corporations who are already operating in Muslim majority countries and have products or services that are maybe catered towards a Muslim audience. And this is the first time we got people like that into a room together and to really kind of take this consumer segment a lot more seriously. And coming out of that over the years, we did several conferences, we produced several different research reports. And back then, if you looked at the nature of companies that were operating in the space, and then you look at kind of fast forward 10, 12 years later, what the space looks like, you can clearly see that there has been this transition where companies have been able to adopt technology to create products that are much more wider spread and much more accessible and much more affordable. And that's why I think we've seen a lot of activity happening in this space, particularly in the last 3, 4, 5 years, more so than the previous decade. And so my particular experience, like I said, I was involved with the nonprofit. I saw a lot of these companies come through. We held competitions for Muslim entrepreneurs. And it was sort of my own personal training, because then it led me to eventually founding my own company, which is also in the investing in personal finance space. And we've had quite a bit of challenges kind of getting it up off the ground, but last year we became a venture-backed startup, and to be a venture-backed startup here in the U.S. while being an Islamic finance company, I think it's a pretty big deal. In fact, I believe we were the second company ever in the U.S. to be VC-backed, being an Islamic finance startup. So I think there's been a lot of progress over the years, and I'm excited to see where things are going.
MashaAllah. So what was your journey into getting VC-backed? I mean, one of the first in the U.S. How was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite an interesting experience, because it wasn't just it was also my first time raising VC as well. So we never thought that would be a possibility for us, to be realistic. So when we started working on the startup, it was my co-founder and I, and we said, look, we're going to bootstrap this thing. We'll put in our own savings if we need to, and then we'll grow it organically from there. And that's kind of what we were doing. And we started back in 2016, and it wasn't until much later, 2019, that we launched a beta, and then 2020 where we actually launched our product publicly. So it was very much slow growth. But then if you look at what has been happening in the financial markets over the last 2 to 3 years, a lot more people have been entering the retail investing world. And so we were able to take advantage of that opportunity. And so we had skyrocketed our growth within a very short period of time. And so at that point, we realized that, okay, well, we can continue down this path of growing slowly, or we can go talk to some investors and see if they would be interested in backing us. And at that point, we had already received some inbound inquiries anyway from potential investors, but we ignored it because we thought, again, we're not a VC appropriate startup. until we started looking at our own numbers, and we thought, you know what, this could make a very compelling case. And so we started having some conversations, started with kind of our own immediate network, got a few angel investors to chip in first. And then once we raised about half the money through angel investors, we had a few VCs lined up, and one of them ended up committing. And they're a US-based VC, like I said. This is the first Muslim company that they've ever invested in. They're really excited about the market. They're really excited about the potential of this market based on what they're seeing, not just through us, but just generally in this space. So it was definitely a great experience, and hopefully it paves the path for other startups as well here in the US.
Amazing, mashallah. Thanks, Saad. Okay, this leads me to a question for Maruf. So you have very extensive experiences in many fields in Islamic economy. So I saw you build many startups, and I heard the great work, mashallah, you did for Halal Expo Canada. Congratulations. So Maruf, what are the main challenges you have faced in introducing new products into the Islamic economy? So whether you can compare it into new product into conventional economy versus the Islamic economy, since it's a new market, new trend, maybe not as structured as the conventional market.
Yeah, so the main challenges for the many startups, not only startups we work with, I think in general, many startups, there are many, of course, every startup has their own challenge. I think that for especially Islamic economy, number one challenge is the funding. It's obvious, but especially for Muslim audience, the reason is that, like as Saad was saying, that even he was not considering to raise from the VC, because sometimes we know the word that path leads, and like we're not only for Muslim economy, but like depending where they are, where they come from, it might affect you, right? That's why I think most of the startups they tend to not to raise from the conventional modes, but at the same time they will limit themselves, I guess, to want to raise from from the people who has let's say vision, like similar vision, preferably probably Muslim investors and VCs. But unfortunate reality is that, as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know any Muslim-backed VCs, right? Specifically, they invest in this kind of programs. So startups that you are, as a startup, as a company who is coming to in this Islamic economy world and trying to do something, you are in the middle of the two hard things. On the one side, you don't want to go to traditional VCs. On the other hand, you don't have an alternative. That's the biggest challenge in terms of funding.
Sure.
Number two challenge, what we are seeing recently is that the marketing. When I say marketing is that I think about 2-3 months ago, Facebook, now it's called Meta, they have discontinued targeting. I mean, not only Muslim, but I mean religious, political interest. So for majority of our clients at Halal.Ad and in many startups, they use Facebook and Instagram because it's affordable, it's scalable. So now they cannot, right? To some extent, majority of our for our clients, we kind of came up with a solution. But I think for the other Muslim startups, for the other Muslim companies, they want to use this channel. That's become always like irrelevant. Like they cannot use that any longer. So to make my answer much more shorter, I guess, the two main challenges I see. Number one is the funding. Number two is the marketing, especially on social media. Other than that, alhamdulillah, I don't think the Muslim Ummah is short of creative ideas. We just need proper support, especially in funding, right, to make it work.
Inshallah. Very interesting. I mean, the second challenge, it's an opening, right? It's an opportunity for some startup in the Islamic economy to build such products that respond. So that's good.
Absolutely, yeah. If there is a Muslim startup comes up and builds something similar to Facebook, right? And that caliber that serves the Muslim economy, that would be awesome.
Definitely. So that's what part of this is what we're trying to do in Wasabih, the professional community for the halal economy. So we are looking into it very, very closely. Wonderful. Yeah, the funding is something very interesting. Okay, I have a question. This is something that I have in mind, and I wanted to know your thoughts. The conventional startup nowadays, to be a good startup, you must be a kind of a unicorn. It's kind of the target. So if you raise hundreds of millions and you are a unicorn, so it's kind of a success. It is the model for the Islamic economy. What do you think about this?
I can just interject there actually. So I think, yeah, as you said, right, like unicorn startup raises X million round, Series A, Series Z, whatever, right? Like all this kind of, there's a lot of hype. Unfortunately, hype doesn't pay the bills, and we've seen that with certain startups where they've raised so much money, but their business model isn't there, and then before you know it, out of nowhere, people are made redundant and it closes, and it's not necessarily 100% ethical. And I think when we're playing in this kind of Islamic startup kind of scene, it's really important to think about the ethics, because yes, you can sit there and take VC money, keep raising, but at the end of the day, somebody has trusted you with their amana, with their money for you to make them money, right? So if you keep taking and are not sitting there figuring out actually how you're going to make this self-sustainable, how you're going to actually make it a profit-driven business, as a Muslim entrepreneur, it's a very kind of fine line. And I think these are considerations that you we have to take. I obviously work in the ecosystem in a sense. I'm not necessarily the startup that's raising the money, but I also done a bit of angel investing through a VC fund, and we are selected. Even had a conversation with Saad, but unfortunately, because they were in America, I couldn't invest. So that's exposed me to that side of the world, and it's been really interesting, kind of being on the other side of the table, because as a Muslim who had some money to kind of give, I'm obviously looking at things from a halal ethical perspective, but then also even Muslamic makers, we got given some grant money to help us do our work. But I'm very careful because, again, somebody's trusted me with their money, and it's really important that I try to, make it self-sustainable. And if I'm honest with you, I'm struggling a bit. So I'm a bit like, okay, maybe I need to go stick to a not-for-profit model. It's a really tricky thing. But I think when you do take money from someone, let that be grant. This can apply to anything, right? It can apply to charity. It can apply to business. It can apply to startups. In a sense, we have a responsibility to kind of do right with that money that is kind of entrusted upon us. So I don't think like that's necessarily the way to go for Islamic startups, to just keep raising and keep taking, but not necessarily on figuring out how to make money.
I agree with you.
If I could add to that.
Sorry, Saad. I absolutely agree with you. And this question really, I want to keep it open for all of us to discuss it, because I believe truly that we have to come up with a model, with the model that suits our belief, and it worked in the past. Nowadays, in terms of startups, entrepreneurship, and domination, we have the conventional that they are there, and the VCs, they are built to create this kind of startup. And the challenge we have is that in front of these VCs, their model is to build domination. So you read that book, From Zero to One. It's just you have to dominate. Is that clear? So if one VC is pouring billions into one startup, the other Muslim startup, you don't have the funding, what will happen to you? So your other startup alone, you cannot survive. But if we think of a model, we work all together, and that we are building this, it will take time, but this model works and is very sustainable. I just can compare the German economy and French economy. French, we have 40 big companies, and if one company has a problem, the whole economy has a problem. But Germany, they have millions of SMEs, small companies. If 1,000 have a problem, they're still strong. So how can we build this model together so that we can help each other distribute the wealth? As you mentioned, Arfah, very rightfully, it's not about someone having billions, being billionaire. It is just about distributing the wealth. We don't need billions to live. This is the teaching of our religion. So what your take into this? Saad, sorry, I cut you. You're resonating.
No worries, and good shout out with 0 to 1. Actually, I think I have it right there on my bookshelf in the blue over there. You can see it. I think just to kind of add to what Arfah was saying. Actually, before I even go there, the initial question around just generally kind of funding and the struggle behind startups getting funded. I think, at the end of the day, one thing that I tell people is that a good idea will always get funded. And that's because VCs and investors in general, they don't really care so much about the specifics of the business if your numbers tell a good story, right? If you could show that regardless of what type of industry you're operating in, if it's a faith-based, if it's not a faith-based, if you have a good business and you have good numbers to show and a good growth rate, things that you look for in any business, investors will line up to fund you. And so in our case, when we went out and fundraised, it was pretty easy for us to fundraise because at that point we had already received quite a bit of inquiry way before we even thought about fundraising from investors. And so at the point where we decided, okay, we're going to go out and raise money, we basically just reached out to the same people, built sort of a list of investors from there, got referred to other investors as well. And for everyone, it was a bit of a no-brainer when they saw the numbers. And so I think when it comes to Muslim startups, I think, we don't have the fortune of, kind of just coming up with an idea and saying, hey, I'm going to fund, raise VC for this idea, which hasn't even been built yet or proven yet. I think we have to, unfortunately, the bar is set higher for us. And so we need to build something, find a way to build something, show traction before we can go out and raise funding. And as Arfah said, I mean, there is this sort of, ethical sort of responsibility that comes with that money as well. One of the things that keeps me awake at night is seeing the other operators in the space go out and raise millions and millions of dollars in VC at crazy high valuations that don't make any sense, and then not have anything to show for it, and then eventually shut down or something comes out where, it basically leaves a stain for all the other Muslim entrepreneurs or Muslim companies in that space. So, we can't control the rest of, the industry, but we can control what we do. And so even when we raised money last year, we never made an announcement. We never made a big deal about it because we thought, okay, this money is going to help us get to the next phase of our business. And we have a responsibility to the investors to use it appropriately versus kind of just going out there and making a lot of noise and throwing parties and that, we raise a bunch of money. So I think there is this level of responsibility that comes with that money, and especially being Muslims, we have those principles that we need to operate under.
Absolutely true. Maruf, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so like I echo what the panelists are saying. So on the one hand, we have this ethical dilemma: how to make sure that we don't do just talk the talk, but not to walk the walk, right? On the other hand, as Saad was saying, before you can ask for funding, you need to build something, right? So I think I agree. I'm in the middle of with two thoughts. Like at the end of the day, if you want to make your startup successful, I believe sooner or later you will run into this dilemma: do I have to raise funding, or do I want to do it the hard way? Like you can see, like MailChimp, right? MailChimp never raised money. Yes, that's right. But at the same time, look at MailChimp when they entered the market, some email marketing. They were entered very early. They grow organically, and it worked out for them. But the question is, in this day and age, like, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's very difficult, right? If you wanna, especially unless you are in your niche and you are very, very early, that train has already left. So while we need to raise funds, with ethics, with understanding, at the same time, we need. I believe for many startups, we work every day and night. They need funding. Like without funding, they will not see a chance. At the same time, what Saad was saying, it was easier for them. Absolutely, because the for example, Zoya is an Saad's example. He started 4 years ago, right? They were just doing without raising the funds, mashallah, and the numbers were right, and it said they also wanted to raise. And I think that's the best spot to be for many startups, right? You start up without even depending on the funds. There comes a time you're doing good numbers and people come and begin to invest because they can see the numbers. I agree with the Saad is that if you have a good case study for VC or anybody who's, because the numbers actually tell a compelling story. You can try to cover up with all the big things and flamboyant things, but in the end, it's like, okay, show me the numbers, right? Show me the traction and how many users are coming, how many users are using it, and they keep coming in attention. At the end of the day, I believe even though we work in the Islamic economy and we have to treat ourselves, we work in just the economy, not necessarily Islamic economy. Yes, we do faith-based, but at the same time, we have to play with the same rules. If you want to raise funds, we're talking about wow, Mao, Dao, and attention, everything. We cannot come back to investors and say, hey, by the way, I'm doing this Islamic thing. Give me money. Your rules don't apply to me because I'm different. Oh, you're doing for God and this and that. This is not the way you're gonna do that, right? And the VCs don't care, and not even the VCs. Like, even though we have to treat our Muslim brothers and sisters, like you cannot ask for unless you're a charity. Unless you're a charity.
No.
We don't want you to be charity, right? We want you to run your business professionally, bring the numbers, prove your numbers. If your numbers make sense, then go and raise.
No.
Make sure whatever you put the money. At the end of the day, what investors want, they're giving you money right now. Do you want to see X number of return on investment, right, in the future? If you believe in that, then go and raise. At the end of the day, I believe even you raise proper with the ethical things or you don't, at the end of the day, I think the VCs are not crazy. I mean, they're not dumb, right? They're not gonna give you money just because you are a really good speaker. Yeah, look at your numbers. It's possible sometimes you get me money. You may raise millions of money to whatever it is. I believe in the long you can fool people in the short run. In the long run, you cannot fool people. Like in the long run, that it will iron out the not good players. Some VCs may get burned. That's their job. They have to verify, right? So I wouldn't be worried about the things. You do your job. Like if you have a good story, eventually you will get funded. And if your actual idea is, so what the VCs are doing in their back of their mind, if I invest in this, can I get 100x? Not like 1x or 2x, 100x. Can I get it in the probably 5 to 10 years?
Yep.
It's pretty much it.
Yep. MashaAllah. That really makes sense. So Arfah, I still have the questions related to this one. I've heard and I've witnessed some startup. They say, okay, it's my startup. I'm a Muslim. I want to build something for the Islamic economy. I don't want to have people who don't share my belief have the control of my company. And when they have the control, they can change the direction. And if they change the direction, actually, I cannot be there. For example, if they start putting riba in my startup or something else. So what's your take in this? We want to grow, but at some point we have to get their money. How do you do?
So, I mean, my answer is really simple for this, right? Risk comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you've got to be very careful with who you take money from, number one, right? We've had this with Muslamic makers where MI6 came knocking on our door asking us to help them do some recruitment. Well, it was a third party who asked us to do that. And when I had that conversation with the recruiter, she literally said, oh yeah, so this is them, etc. And I said, I'm going to stop you right there, and because I know I cannot take this money, I cannot work with you guys because this is this isn't something that my community would like. It's harmful for my community, and I'm going to walk away from this conversation right now. And she respected me from it. She sent me an email later saying, I'll keep you in mind for other clients. So I think that you've always got to remember that as number one, that turning away money that that could potentially take you off course. We always bring the right kind of money your way. Now, it's very important in terms of, this could be in terms of people you employ. It could be, if you're finding a co-founder, CEO and stuff. That person necessarily doesn't have to be Muslim. They just have to share the same values, right? So I often cite the story of Muslamic in its early days. One of the co-founders of Ryan, non-Muslim CTO, Shazad brought him in, and they did what they needed to do to kind of raise money from YCOM, etc. He was like, right, cool, I've done what I want to do. Shazad brought him out, off he went, right? But he served his purpose for Muslamic at the time, and he wasn't necessarily from the faith, but he got the startup, he got the values, and he had the skills. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to just go for like Muslim talent either. Values are values. And I think it's just really important as well that, staying away from kind of riba and loans and interest and that kind of stuff. Yes, it does make it hard because sometimes the money that is available is loans that come with interest. And that might be, right now you might be like, oh, if I take this loan, oh yeah, the government's giving it, it's a slightly slow, lower interest rate, it could be good, etc. Yeah, of course you can take it, right? You could probably find a way to justify it as well, because that's just how what we do as humans. But I think, and ultimately, I'm not here on a pedestal and judging people who have, because at the end of the day, you've got to do what's right for yourself, what you think's right for you, and spiritually, etc. You know what your values are, and I think as long as you stick by them, then you'll build a company where other people will also know what it is, and that ethos will kind of run through the company, which means that maybe one day if you were to step away and you're not the CEO or owning it anymore, etc., that the stuff that you didn't want to happen won't happen to your business. So I think it's really about kind of setting the right intentions and kind of just doing what you need to do.
Absolutely great. Intention is definitely innamal a'malu binniyat. So I think in every action we do, whether it's for the business, whether for everything we do, we have to renew our intention to purify, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify it. And that definitely has an impact on any decision we are making, whether it's taking people's money, whether it's hiring people, whether it's dealing with Muslims, non-Muslims. So that's absolutely key. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep our intention pure, and so that He can help us in making the decisions and standing, because sometimes definitely you can see money. It happened to me, to our startup many times, that they give, okay, we can give you this amount of money. It's here, but it's 6% interest. Okay, if you don't take it, so you might just close down the startup. As a Muslim, sharing these values, you are ready to even close down your startup than taking those things. So that's important to mention, mashallah.
A friend of mine, he does spoken word and writes poetry, and he once said that you can't plant the trees of paradise with the seeds of hell, and so I think that is exactly kind of what us entrepreneurs need to embrace in this space. At the end of the day, we are Muslims, and we're building a business that is for Muslims. And so that comes with a ton of responsibility, and we should never take that lightly. And so, I think there are going to be challenges, of course, for Muslim entrepreneurs, many different types of challenges. I think the fundraising aspect, to be honest with you, is really just one piece of that. Once you actually get the funds and then you start doing everything else you need to do in a business, you start to realize there's a lot more challenges as well, right? That's just kind of one piece of the puzzle, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to, marketing, so on and so forth. So the things that Maruf mentioned earlier as well. I would encourage Muslim entrepreneurs who are seeking funding to explore a few different options that are out there as well. It doesn't always have to be VC or nothing. Now you have a lot of these crowdfunding platforms, right? So you could go down the traditional crowdfunding route, or even better, now there's the equity crowdfunding platforms out there as well, which is great because you're getting funding essentially directly from your future customers, right? And so that's the best way to prove your business is like, hey, these are people who are willing to pay me for my product, and they're also investing, and they're showing that by investing in me, right? So that's one great way of doing it. There's a lot of these other non-dilutive funding sources too now, where you can basically, if you have a business that's generating revenue, they'll essentially make like a profit-based model where they'll take a percentage of your profits in exchange for capital today. And so again, beyond VC, there are a lot more options today available that weren't there before, and I think we need to get a little bit more creative with how we want to raise money.
Absolutely makes sense. Definitely, I think that's the key word, to be more creative, because we all are looking into the conventional model that we are seeing all over the place, and I believe that there is a model. There is a model to bring in for this startup in the Islamic economy. So, alhamdulillah, I can see that we are all in the right track. Bismillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be with us and make us useful for the community and the humanity through entrepreneurship. So yes, so definitely, as you mentioned, Saad, figures. You show your figures. Definitely, it's not that because your name is Muhammad, you have a right intention to inshallah to do this and that. You have to show something. You have to deliver something, and you have to convince customers to buy your product. In our side, for example, we are working a lot with trade shows and conferences in the Islamic economy, but also in conventional economy. So, but most of the trade shows and conferences in the Islamic economy that use business matching platform, they work with us. But many of them, they are just starting. Some is their second edition, some is their first edition. So they are just exploring the market. So you have to accompany them, but at the same time, you also have to make revenue. So are you facing these challenges that since this is a new market, you are dealing with new type of customers who are just trying the market as well? How are you dealing with this? Because the revenue might not be that big or enough like an existing market or the conventional market where the market is already there. So.
Sure. So, I mean, in our case, when we went down and raised money, we were very clear that this is essentially a pre-seed round, which in the world of VC really means, you have, seed, Series A, Series B, so on and so forth. Pre-seed basically says like, look, we're still sort of experimenting. We're still trying to figure things out. We've shown some traction, but we're not really sure where things are going to go. And so that's the intent of this fundraise. And so you're clear about that up front, and you say, look, over the next, call it 18 months or so, when I start deploying this capital, we may not be able to show significant revenue in that time period because that is not our intention with this fundraise. Our intention is to lay the foundation, to build out our team, and then go from there and start focusing on kind of growth and revenue generation and so on and so forth. In our case, we were really, 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 really lucky that, for a company in a pre-seed stage, we already had, extremely compelling revenue, extremely compelling traction. We even had we're primarily a B2C business, but we even had enterprise level, interest as well. And so when you compared us to any other conventional startup in the pre-seed stage, we instantly stood out. So that whole question of being an Islamic company, Muslim company, faith-based company, no one even questioned that. No one really cared about it because they just saw that our numbers are so good, right? So again, it does go back to telling a good story, and then also having a big vision, right? And I think we touched on this earlier on, which is that, you don't want to sell, kind of this big unachievable dream, but you should have a big vision that, where you can demonstrate there is a achievable path, right, to get there. And so we communicated that big vision, saying that, look, right now what we have is essentially an MVP, and it's a great MVP, but it hasn't even scratched the surface to what we actually want to do. And here's the story of what we want to do and how we're going to get there. And that's kind of how we did it, and it ended up working out for us. So I don't know, does that answer your question? Sorry, I kind of lost track.
Definitely makes sense. So Maruf, what would you advise for the startups? I believe many of the topic we discuss are great learning for starting in the Islamic economy, whether it's for funding, whether it's getting the product right, whether it's our niyyah in all action we do. So if you had few recommendations to give to the startups venturing in the Islamic economy, there are many more and more of them around the world. So what would you share with them based on your experience with dealing with the industry?
So to answer your question, I think, because I know we are running out of time, I have to respect other people as well. Before, so whoever is, anybody who's coming to Islamic economy, we know we put out the big numbers there out there, like $1 trillion economy, this and that. The first is your niyyah, why you're coming. If it's just for the sake of just money, I would advise you try other venues, because there are other places you can make money easier. That's number one. Number two is before you go to and ask for money, I don't think it's anymore. You can just keep up with an idea, raise funds, right? So you have to be willing to put at least 1 year there where you will be working day and night on your idea. You have to tell a story to call other team members to make this happen and show some traction, like launch your MVP, get some users on board, and see if someone is willing to pay for that, and ideally repeatedly, right? If you can prove that model to some extent, then you can go and raise funds on a smaller scale. Now we're talking about like millions and billions of dollars, but then you can go and tell other people, like Saad was saying, hey, look, I made this, we made this, we can see it's working. And if you get the funding, we might actually accelerate this growth, or we build a team, or we build a traction. So until your next round, right? And that's one way. That's the one way that you want to go. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to go to VC, you have to have in your mind that you want to grow this business to really large amount of business. That's one way. And does every business have to go that way? No, they don't have to. And some business we see they're just lifestyle business, but it's okay. So that's something. The main difference is, like, are you building a startup? Are you building a lifestyle company? If you're building a lifestyle company, you don't need funding, right? You may get funding from your family and friends, and maybe some people a smaller amount. It does works. But if you're building a startup, if you're defining a startup which is building something which was not built before, which is serving a large enough audience that other people might put money and accelerate to something huge, bigger, larger than yourself, that's something else, right? First, you have to define what you're building. If you're building a startup, good head of work is ahead of you, and it's not going to be easy, but hopefully, inshallah, it will be worth. At the same time, I want to give them the being pragmatic. Not every startup idea works. We know that the ratio is like 9-1, so you have to be okay that to fail more likely. Absolutely. And you learn, and maybe you can launch another startup eventually. So
wonderful.
I know it's not the rosy rainbow, but that's what it is.
No, it's definitely key. I've noted them definitely create the niyyah, have an MVP, ready to fail. I believe this is fundamental. And I will. It's an honor to give the last word for Arfah. So what would be your recommendation, because you are dealing with many of them? Please.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of it's been covered, but I think mine are simply know your values and know what your boundaries are as well. Everyone has slightly different boundaries, so really kind of know what that boundary is in terms of stuff that money that you won't accept from certain people, whatever it is. Really figure that out now before it comes knocking, because when it can come knocking, you can get tempted. So really, before that even happens, figure out what your hard no's are, and then stick to it.
MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. Powerful. Jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining this session. I learned a lot, and alhamdulillah, I really, what you are saying is the thing I resonates a lot to me. So I'm really happy to be sharing this with you guys, and I'm pleased to meet you guys. I've been following you here and there. Akramakumullah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you well, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep your intention intact, and may He make us useful for the community and for the humanity. Thank you. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much.